26 U.S.C. 511. Imposition of tax on unrelated business income of charitable etc., meaning amongst others, organizations. The normal course of business for certain entities, unincorporated 508 religious entities, their normal course of business is assumed to be not taxable. Other entities that most people are familiar with to do business, LLCs, etc., their normal course of business is presumed taxable. But by default of 508 entities, its actual business income is not taxable. And when you start to speak about the possibility of being taxed, it has to be outside of its course of business. It's almost like an anomaly from what most people know, because they think your normal course of business is where tax is derived. But where 508 entities are concerned, within its normal course of business, it is not taxed. I want you to sit back and actually think about that for a moment. The only time a 508 can be taxed is if it goes outside its normal course of business. Whereas the norm in everyone's awareness is your normal course of business is that you are just taxed. But there are entities out here that are the complete opposite. So much that criteria have to be created to say, even if it works outside of its scope, its purpose, this is how it's to be taxed. And here are the exclusions of it. So your foundation and your beginning point should be non-taxable. Your normal course of business should be non-taxable. And even if you were to step outside of that course of business, there are still things that benefit you. This is almost difficult for some people to even wrap their minds around. It might sound a bit too good to be true to some people. But when you realize that human activities, the things humans do, is the core behind everything that humans subsequently put on pen and paper, it would make sense. To those people in the stock market, they know that before July 4th comes, simply invest in the stocks of companies that make fireworks. Simply invest in the stocks of companies based on anything relating to patriotic activity. For those who invest in futures market, which is what controls the bond and stock market, futures market is basically someone says, I anticipate that the price of oil will go up to $100 per barrel. And I put it on pen and paper. And if it's so, then I make money off of it. If it's not, I don't make money off of it. But this contract that I've put down based on my anticipation, I can now sell it to others. Therefore, they have my right and interest to make the money that I can. So people buy that futures contract. People aren't really buying the oil, but they're buying the contract. At some point, that contract would end up in someone's hand who would now have to actually buy that oil or sell that oil. If something goes right with that anticipation and it matches the actual activity of the oil price, they either make money or lose money. And if they don't want to lose money, they don't enforce the contract. And that gets the ships that hold all the oil stuck with the oil. And that affects the everyday man's activity when it comes to supply and demand of actual oil in society, which will cause gas stations to increase their oil price. Anyone who knows those basics about how futures market works, oil for instance, as relates to futures market, they know that the whole goal is to pass the buck as quick as possible. You don't want to be that man that ends up with a contract by the time that anticipated period comes alive. Anyone who works in the stock market knows that by summertime or before summertime, humans have a tendency to wear loose clothing, flip-flops, bikinis. They invest in gym materials. So, well, you invest in stocks of companies dealing with summer-related activities, or anyone who do drop shipping on eBay, Amazon, or through other suppliers through WhatsApp internationally. They know to basically start doing drop shipping relating to the theme of the weather, so on and so forth. regular scheduled program in commerce. Based on what? Based on human activity. The same thing applies with the issue of someone having their hands in your pocket. We explained in previous videos that the origin of taxing is just through an experiment, a social experiment, no different than the face mask thing with a social experiment. Taxing was the same way. They say, look, support your country for this world war. Give us some of your monies. People said, yeah, cool. After a while, they realized these are some patriotic people. Might as well just automate it by saying, here is a 9-digit algorithm that you can just allow us to dig into your pockets automatically from your work because you know you love your country so much. People said, yeah, let's do it. And then they tagged it into your identity. They tagged it into a form of mandatory performance rather than voluntary, which a lot of people get stuck in and fail to realize that it was turned into a regular scheduled program despite its origin being voluntary. And if it's not mandated, they put counter incentives to basically punish you for it if you don't use tax properly. But based on constitutional principles that makes the Western world separate from the rest. Many countries around the world have constitutions, but compared to North America's constitution, it's nothing. If you've ever been to any other part of the world and read their constitution, you don't even have to go there. You have the technological luxury. Look it up. And then look up the language of Congress and legislature and match it up with those principles. You see that North America is far better. At North America, despite taxes being voluntary at its origin, and disincentives were placed into the language of certain things to basically compel people, besides the fact that people are asleep. While all that's going on, a way out is created. I always say this. Whoever creates the problem must create the solution, because the subconscious mind or the preconscious mind that knows everything would always find a way to bring an alarm to the forefront of the mind to say something is wrong, which will create anarchy. Therefore, a solution has to be automatically created to decrease that alarm, or to put a blanket over that alarm, or to deactivate that alarm in the masses of people's mind, because subconscious know that there's a natural solution out here that anyone can access. All that is left now is the mental toil of you studying, which is part of the natural test if you're here on Earth. That part is not up to the tortfeasors to show you. But there are those who come along those lines of that same life experience and figure a little bit of something out and go, you know what? Maybe it's good to show other people this. If they heed these words, good. If they don't, good also. The least they can say is they've never been told. And here we are. Human activity. People tend to forget things. People tend to be born into a system that they feel it's not normal, yet they just go by doing it. Such as when you create a business as an entrepreneur, get your LLCs, get your C Corp, get your S Corp. Good, that's a starting point. At least you get acclimated with the basic administrative things of interfacing with agencies of a state or a federal body politic. Now move forward and increase. No, it's no different than reading your ABCs, all right? You've been reading it for year 1, year 2, year 3, but are you gonna start combining those letters to create words, phrases, sentence, paragraph, more concise explanation of things? Or are you just going to remain stuck in ABC? When people constantly do business in a world out here involved in human activities, and they're just using LLCs and things like that, to some people in their eyes, it's no different than you being in a stage of ABCs, which is fine. So long as it serves your purpose, that's all right. And even if that's what you want to do, there are ways you can layer it that we went over in this webinar. If you find yourself in a circumstance where you're required the use of LLCs, S Corps, and C Corps. And on that note, another video is being made when it comes to the Corporate Transparency Act, See, the reason I'm constantly, and I have been entertaining matters of 508, is partly because of that Corporate Transparency Act. Because if you can get away from the use of LLCs, generally speaking, you don't even have to worry about that, even though there were exemptions in that Corporate Transparency Act, which goes into effect in 2024, whereby if an LLC is owned by a trust, they have to be reported to some federal agency. But then there's some exceptions, which videos have been made on that. But nonetheless, that's all a bunch of extra headache. For those who don't want to deal with it, why don't you just use a proper entity in the first place? It doesn't have to go through all those public scrutinies. Besides someone having their hands in your pocket. Human activities. And that same human activity is the same that you have to pay attention to in your business affairs that you will implement into your purpose. That way, your entity and your purpose does not qualify for UBIT tax. This has also been mentioned in prior videos that tax is not about whether it's voluntary or not. Tax, belief or not, as harsh as it sounds, when you really objectively see how it works, you realize it's not about whether someone is cheating you or not. It's more so about, do you qualify for it or not? Simple as that. If you qualify for taxes, do you have to pay it? Do you have to satisfy it? Yep, you do. If you don't qualify for it, based on the algorithm of how it's meant to work, then you simply don't. It is that simple. And it's all based on human condition and human activities you will implement into your purpose. No different than the people who are day traders or those using the high frequency trading or those in the futures market. Know that certain human condition and activity affect those things on pen and paper. You functioning through a religious entity, know that humans' activity affect things on pen and paper. And you, objectively, not in bad faith, but objectively can capitalize on it. They call that capitalism. Because the system is already perfect and it's there. Therefore, you go in accordance to First Amendment religious substantive right and create an entity for the purpose of somewhere within it, they sneak in what benefits you if you know how to be an entrepreneur. Same thing applies with the part of legislature that affirms 508 entities. It was enforced through some type of small business tax reform act that we showed in the 508 versus 501c3 video. They always sneak in what benefits you in there. It's a little bit at a time. You just have to know what you're looking for and you'll find it rather than speculating. Let us learn from the three wise men within a theological text in the Bible. Yes, that theological text has cosmology, astrology, and other forms of science in it. But let's put that to the side and look at things from just the human psychology perspective. People who know certain things, people who do certain things, people who have certain things, and they all uniformly possess some very particular attributes. And those attributes is told to you within the allegory of the three wise men in the Bible. Despite those three wise men being already rich, obviously it's demonstrated by what they brought to Jesus, and already being wise, obviously because that's the title and the way that the text related to them deliberately, so you know what their status is. Despite them being already rich and wise, they never stopped seeking wisdom. That's one thing we should learn from that. They traveled far and beyond to find that soul. That these things we're speaking of in these videos is what certain people know and do not care to take the time to sit down and actually show you and explain it to you. When you get it, it would seem too good to be true. But in reality, it is the truth. It is the truth that certain group of people socioeconomically exist in. And they will not tell you. The most you will hear them say somewhere in the middle of a conversation is, oh, I have a charitable organization, or I have a non-for-profit. And even then, two people can say they have a charitable or non-for-profit organization. The status of it and how they use it and what they know is different. These are the things that makes the difference. Once you really get that continuous flow of monies is what really assists you live a comfortable life without you working and putting in the toil for someone else's business. And that the medium you ought to do it through is the constitutional principles, which ties into your nature. Remember, the Constitution only affirms what your natural essence is, which is your rights. And one of those is your parallel connection to divinity. And always recall, divinity will never submit to the lower creatures. Man, we have to use divine principles and align ourselves in our daily human affairs. Only then will we be fully benefited amongst the affairs of man.
Complete for the 1 minute videos on the Patreon page. Take care. Best of luck.